And good evening. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. I'm Rachelle Wilson, your journalist and your hostess for the next hour. And tonight's guest is a very important guest because it's a guest unlike anything we've ever had before here in the state of Delaware. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight for tonight's interview with a candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Donyale Hall. Thank you very much for doing this interview. We appreciate you. I know that I personally, I had never heard of you before. Alicia reached out to me. And so I'm curious, tell us, who are you and where are you from?
Well, I'm going to start out by saying I'm not so important. I'm just a humble servant that has been diligently really seeking change in the state of Delaware. Excuse me. For a lot of years as a mom, I'm a mom of 10 beautiful children.
Oh, wow.
I have emancipated 6 of them from my wallet. So that's a success story
Yes.
all in and of itself. Praise God.
Yes.
I have 4 that are at home still in remote learning. Say some prayers for me.
Right.
I got a 3rd grader, a 5th grader, one that's a junior, and one that's a senior in high school. So there's a pretty large gap there. And so we're navigating, remote learning, and that's not fun at all for the kids. So we'll get onto that subject later.
Right.
I am a businesswoman. I have a small general contracting company. I do remodeling, interior and exterior. I also do a little bit of lawn and landscaping. I am also an Air Force veteran. So
Yes.
I served in the early 90s in support of Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Oh, my.
4 years. Yes.
Wow.
And I served as an aircraft maintenance troop. So, I've been a trailblazing soul all my life. So,
Yes, yes.
why stop now?
Why stop now?
Why stop now, indeed.
That's amazing. A veteran, United States military, and you did Desert Storm.
Well, I didn't do a tour over there.
Okay.
I served in support of the
Okay.
mission. So by the time I got finished with my training, the conflict was resolved. But you know what? It was close.
Yeah.
And I received the news that all of that conflict had broke out just weeks before I was due to leave. And I had a 9-month-old baby girl, and I was really afraid, at that point that I might end up deployed and wouldn't be able to see her, in her formative years. So, when you sign your name on that dotted line, it's up and payable to your life. So,
Yeah.
we make some very valuable contributions serving our country, and it's a family legacy. My dad was a Vietnam vet. He served 26 years. I have 2 sons that are currently serving and carrying on the family legacy of service. One's in the National Guard, one's on active duty.
Yes.
So, we've got some people that have opted to go to college, some that have went off to the military, some that are doing college and the military.
Right.
So, it's a great...
You're definitely not unfamiliar with having a handful to do, a lot to do. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, well, you're going to need that for the state of Delaware as Lieutenant Governor. So, and you're coming from the lower part of Delaware. Is that Sussex County or Dover?
I actually live in Dover, so
Okay.
I'm right dead in the middle of the state.
Okay.
The capital was right in my backyard, so I have a lot of bellyfuls of gripes and groans and complaints about what comes out of Lake Hall over there in terms of Delaware policy. I've been on both sides of that whole conversation. I've been hurt and helped by policy. So I see where we really need to, refine some things and really speak to the issues here in Delaware.
Now, Delaware is a blue state, and you're definitely waving a red, a red flag. And typically, I try to not get too deep into the race thing, but race is very important, especially now. It seems that George Floyd's death really has tipped the scale all across America on so many different levels. So here you are, a woman of color, beautiful, by the way, and 10 children, absolutely magnificent you are. And you're going to run to be Lieutenant Governor for the state of Delaware. What does that look like?
As a Republican,
as
no
a
less.
Republican,
Right? Yeah. So I wasn't always a Republican. I was a 30-year Democrat before I shifted my party affiliation. And I had a gentleman who was actually running for this particular office in 16 who said, I'd love to have your support for my campaign. And I sat and he told me he was Republican, and I kind of cocked my head to the side and said, that's strange, black man, a Republican running in the state of Delaware. Talk to me about that. So when I was growing up, my father always had us sit at the table and we talked about politics. And even though I was affiliated as a Democrat, we never voted straight ticket anything. My father was a firm believer in voting people over party. And so he taught me to really investigate what people stood for and vote my values. So for that reason, even though I was affiliated that way, I never really voted party line anyway. So the gentleman I'm speaking of, he called into question. He says, well, why are you affiliated as a Democrat? And I said, well, because my parents were that. And so I really hadn't done, the political ideology to see where I really truly lay on the spectrum of my political beliefs. So he gave me a test. And I took the test, and he came back after he graded the test, and he said, congratulations, you're a Republican. My mouth hit the floor. Okay. So, of course, me being me, I'm an educated woman, so I have a master's degree in business with a concentration in finance. And numbers never lie.
Right.
So I needed to go and fact check that a little bit.
Okay.
Took a couple more tests, and all of them came back that I was considered a right-leaning centrist. Now, I'd always known that my fiscal conservative beliefs leaned me right. And I've always been conservative for probably the last 20 years after I had kids and figured out my tax dollars needed to be doing something a little different. You kind of look at your finances under a microscope at that point. So, that goes without saying that, of course, I wanted my tax dollars to be spent wisely. But for all other things, I was considered to be a centrist. And so I always paint the analogy for people that if you really think about the swing of a pendulum, it's only at its extreme left or right for the littlest of time. Most of it's in the middle. Yes. And I think that most of us as people are somewhere in the middle on most issues. And I think that just being able to be open to the conversation about those issues and how we approach them is key. So it really doesn't matter where you lay on the political spectrum. If you have an openness and a willing to have a conversation about what we should do for the benefit of all people, that's what's important. So I definitely have a strong fiscal side, but the issues are what they are. And because I've had 10 children and been educated in the public education system here myself, my children have went through public education. I've seen the successes and the miserable failures that are our Delaware public education system. So I have my druthers and I have my gripes, my groans and complaints, but I've always been a person that when I come to the table with those gripes, groans and complaints, I bring a solution.
Awesome. I love that.
So I don't come prepared with some kind of a solution, right?
You can't just be moaning and complaining with no solution. I don't think that's a good
not
way
constructive.
To go.
It's not. So
it's not.
People.
So Dover is not too different, kind of, from the city of Wilmington. It's like it has a city flair to it. Dover does. And then on the other side of Dover, we have our Sussex County, which it just gets into a little bit more of our open southern, country. We can still see some cows down there. And
just a few.
Just a few cows are there in Sussex County. So the point I'm making is a different mentality. People are different in Sussex County than they are up here in Wilmington or the way they are in Dover. Yes. The mentality and the issues are different.
They are.
So how do you address all of the different mindsets and concerns as Lieutenant Governor for the entire state of Delaware?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'm a firm believer that in order to effectively represent the interests of people, you have to know those people. And so I've often felt that so many of our elected officials sit somewhere way up high and look down low at those of us who have our boots on the ground and trudging among the issues. And if you hope to really be able to represent what's in the best interest of people, you have to know them. So relatability is number one on my meter scale of what's important for elected officials. So I definitely want to see people that take the time, like I do, to travel in each of the counties, because each one of them has its own unique characteristic and it has its personality. And if you don't understand those personalities, how can you be the voice for them? So that's something very crucial. So, you indicated that down in Sussex, we still have rural farming communities and so forth. So, those are things that are important to a lot of those folks that are down there still doing the agricultural side.
Yes.
And then if you move over to the eastern side of Sussex, you have the tourism, and you have a lot of people who have retired and have their vacation homes. And so there's a lot of different pockets of culture all across the state. Being in I guess it's kind of good that I'm in the middle because, I see a lot of blended type cultures in the middle of the state. So we're a little bit more the middle of the road. And of course, in Wilmington, we have a culture up here that's frightening. I mean, there's
this is a straight up city up here.
And Wilmington is one of the most dangerous cities in the entire United States.
Unfortunately, if I'm not mistaken, someone mentioned that Delaware was nicknamed as Murder Town, USA. I find that hard to believe that little old Delaware, the second smallest state in the entire nation, is known as Murder Town, USA, and also has the second highest population of incarcerated people in America. I find that to be problematic, Donyale. And so I have to pose the question, as an activist for change and reform, as well as a journalist for prison and justice, what can you do? What will you be willing to do? What are you passionate about doing in that particular arena?
Well, one of the constitutional duties of the Lieutenant Governor is to chair the Board of Pardons. Now, the Board of Pardons is a very critical role in giving people a true second chance. So the statistics that you alluded to earlier, Delaware is about 23% Black and brown. And our prisons are 60% Black and brown.
Go figure.
With a 3-year recidivism rate of 65% Black and brown. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the numbers and say something is wrong with this picture and that we need to do something that corrects that whole thing.
Yes.
We got to find something that moves that needle. So first and foremost, I think that we need to have more rehabilitation for those people who have been incarcerated. If the goal is to have them come back, then keep doing what we're doing, okay? And maybe there's some financial benefit in having our prisons populated and overpopulated.
I will be the first to get on my I will be the first on my soapbox.
I'm just saying, maybe.
But I find it very interesting, and I have to say this. I find that it's very interesting that a lot of the people, or too many people, in parts of Delaware, think that if you've been incarcerated, you must be the scum of the earth. Certainly, there's no other reason for you to be incarcerated than you're absolutely the scum of the earth, and you deserve to be there, and there should be no prison reform. There are people in Delaware who believe that.
I know this.
There are people who believe that.
Because if you take a look at COVID, for instance, there were states across the nation that did compassionate releases.
Yes.
I don't think I can call the name of an individual that had a compassionate release in the state of Delaware. I know individuals, family members that are near and dear to my heart, and certainly if there's such a prevalence of incarceration among the communities of color, you either have a family member or somebody who has a family member here that's incarcerated. So having said that, I know people that were asthmatic and at high risk for death if they caught that virus. And they couldn't find the compassion for those people who were close to fulfilling, their incarceration time to let them go. We had elderly people.
Yes.
That couldn't hurt a fly at this point, and we couldn't compassionately release them. It speaks volumes, and it talks to me and speaks to me about our inhumane emotion toward life. I think we treat animals in the state of Delaware better than we do some of the people who are
Yes.
incarcerated. And like you said, there are a lot of young men and young ladies who got caught up and caught out with the wrong people, the wrong crowd. And if you're like me and a mom, I tell my kids all the time, you can be guilty by association.
That's true.
Choose your friends wisely.
Yes.
You can be in the wrong place at the wrong time and be just as guilty as anybody else. And I've seen it.
It sounds to me like you are a woman of compassion, and that perhaps you would be a compassionate Lieutenant Governor. I will say, as a journalist and as an advocate, I've had the good fortune of meeting the current incumbent, Lieutenant Governor Bethany Hall Long. I've met her on 2 occasions. Once was with Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. And she, Bethany Hall Long was very personable and very friendly. But I think 2 minutes after she left my presence, she forgot that I even existed after standing there and having a dialogue with me. So it's very hard to reach these people and try to engage them in conversations about important things as an advocate or a journalist. I reached out to do an interview, and I haven't heard from her camp yet. So if you are elected as our Lieutenant Governor, will the people be able to reach you?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, my cell phone number is my campaign number. I've had that number for 16 years. I didn't mask it for the sake of the campaign. Some people disguise it and, go through that little system that cloaks your phone number. And I can tell you that it always puts a smile on my face when I answer my phone and I say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Donyale speaking. And the person on the other side says, oh my gosh, you answered the phone. I expected a campaign staffer, and they're always excited that I actually am accessible. I've always prided myself on being accessible. My husband, help him, Lord, my phone rings from the crack of dawn until much later than he would really actually like it to ring.
Yes.
And I can see him grumbling over there, but he knows that, my energy is to make sure that people know that they have somebody who does care and is willing to listen, and not only cares to listen, but to remember your face and remember the conversation. I may not always remember your name. I call my kids, hey, you know who I'm talking about, but from whatever it is that we talk about, it may take, a few little words to make my recollection come back. But, those are the important personable moments that matter to people. Is that when you have a problem, that you can go to someone and call on them for their help, and that they have a genuine interest in helping you. Just to smile and say, oh, yes, that's not who I am. And people will tell you that that's not who I am. The ones that know me well know that when I tell you that I'm going to do something, nothing but death stops me from doing that thing.
So you are a woman of your word. And I do want to say, just as mother and woman, yes, be accessible, let that phone ring and answer it, but there has to be a time period for that, because you don't want your hubby to be feeling a certain kind of way.
Oh yeah. But he does, he does give me the ability to do the things that I do. Yes. And after a certain point, the phone does go off.
Yes, it has to go off, and I'll reach you tomorrow morning.
He's a night owl, so it works out well.
Yeah.
So as long as I can sit up till about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and watch some movies, we're good.
You are personable. I do like that.
Yeah.
Now I have to ask you the tough question and look for the transparent answer. I'm not sure, I believe I'm safe to say in my lifetime, you are the first Black woman to run for Lieutenant Governor in the state of Delaware. Would I be close to accurate if I said something like that?
I am the first one to appear on the general ballot.
Okay.
Now, back in 2016, one of the councilwomen from Wilmington, the Honorable Sherry Dorsey Walker, actually, she's in the House of Representatives now.
Yes.
She actually was in a 6-way primary with the incumbent to run for that office. So we have had a woman of color run before, but not appear on the general ballot. So,
Okay.
I mean, I didn't even think about it until somebody had pointed out the obvious a few days ago and said, if you're successful, you'll be the first African American woman to hold this office.
Yes.
And that kind of sent chills through me.
Yes.
You don't set out, and I'm never one to associate myself with the identity politics, because all these boxes, you check these boxes, but before you put me in a box as just this or that, make sure that you have a whole laundry list of all the other things and qualifications that I bring, to the table. So, I want people to look at me as a whole package. It's certainly a noteworthy accomplishment to be able to do that, especially in the light of, the social cries that we have right now that speak to the fact that we really need to have culturally competent people serve in these higher positions of decision-making authority. We have to have people who are able
understand.
That's right.
They have to understand all of the different, groups of people. And with Wilmington being, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 58%, people who are melanated, brown communities. So whoever is Lieutenant Governor has to focus on that.
Yes.
And with us having the reputation of Murder Town, USA, I just saw a report that Philadelphia had the 400th homicide
So
just this year in 2020, 400. And I didn't do the research to find out these statistics, but each time I turn on the news, it's one of our sons, an African American male, a brown male killing another brown male. And I feel some kind of way about that, being a mother of a brown male. So,
I have 4 brown males in my house. And, unfortunately, it's not just something that's just isolated to our brown male children. Our female children that are melanated are being struck down, from just stray bullets and being in that environment. So, I was having a conversation this morning about that. There's going to be a silent march in Wilmington on Saturday. And I was speaking to a lady that was on the street. And
Tara is doing that. Yes, I know.
Pastor D.
Yes, she's very good.
So I'll be as a part of that, one of the associated sponsors for the event. So I had an opportunity to really talk to some of the people that were down on Market Street, and it hurt my heart. There was a woman that was 2 years older than me, and she might have looked 30 years my senior. Life had not been kind. She indicated that she had a 15-year-old daughter that she was fighting tears, just hoping that at the end of the day, that child was able to come home. And I can honestly say I could relate to that. And I think about, the days that I have to have those uncomfortable conversations with my sons about if you're ever pulled over, how to conduct yourself with an officer, if you're out in the community, how to behave around other people who might be drawing you into situations that are dangerous. You have to pray for your children, and we that have those children out there have a different outlook of the world and how we have to deal with our lives day to day. It's alarming sometimes to wake up in your brown skin.
Yes.
And you don't understand it if it's not been your existence. And I know that we have to have people who are capable of articulating truth to power. And if we don't have those strong voices to advocate for the things that the marginalized communities are enduring, that voice is never heard, and those needs are never addressed. And that's one of the things that I feel very passionate about, is that we have to have all of these underlying socioeconomic disparities and things just looked at and dealt with for what they are. We can't keep diluting things.
When you start dealing with it and actually attempting to not just Band-Aid, but we need some Band-Aids as well. We need some Neosporin and some Band-Aids and some something.
We need surgery.
But when we begin to address the issues and the concerns of disproportionate numbers of what's going on in brown communities, we have our non-brown communities thinking then that we're being biased. towards like, oh, you just want to help brown people, you don't
Well, here's
want to
the
help
thing.
the farming community
Here's
down
the
here in
thing.
Sussex or whatever.
If you look at the numbers, and again, I'm a numbers girl, numbers don't
Yes.
lie.
Okay.
Poverty in this state does not discriminate. And so when you seek to address the underlying socioeconomics, all people rise.
Yes.
All people rise.
Yes.
So it can't even be earmarked as just a concentration or a focus on one particular group. Poverty does not discriminate in this state.
So what are we going to do about creating wealth? I mean, obviously there's some things that have to happen here in the city of Wilmington, housing and homelessness and that sort of thing, because that's wealth, financial wealth, owning a home. But for folks in other parts of Delaware, what can we do considering we're in the middle of COVID-19, 20, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and 20? You know, so we can't go back to work as usual. What are we going to do to lift the economics so that families can survive?
Well, I don't know about you, but I've had to come up with some very creative solutions to my economic woes over the years. And even if there wasn't an opportunity that presented itself to me, I had to go and figure out something. So I'm conditioned to being an outside of the box thinker. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay.
So after giving it, some really in-depth thought, I've talked to some people who I've bounced some ideas off of. How can we create good quality job growth here in the state of Delaware? COVID has been an excellent unveiler of all of the cracks that were there even long before COVID showed its ugly head. Okay, so I tell people that, we were delicately woven with a very thin thread that COVID just popped the strings and now it's all glaring. So,
and it's for everyone.
It's for everyone.
It's not,
yes, it is. It's not discriminating.
It's not discriminating.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Unless you were a state employee, you got to keep your paycheck.
Okay.
All the rest of us were trying to figure it out.
Yes. Yes. Well, I need to apply for a state job.
I'm telling you. And ironically, the state of Delaware is one of the biggest employers, and the second largest employer are small businesses, which 37% went out of business permanently in the last 7 months. So what do we do?
And when they use the word like essential to stay open, I know they're talking about particular things. I know they mean certain things, but to the barbershop owner and the hair salon owner, that's essential because every haircut means now I can put food on the table for my child. So shutting down the barbershop, shutting down the hair salon, and all of, the dressmaker who sells retail, those are essential jobs because it meant her feeding her family, and I just, we need to do something. What are your thoughts on it? I don't know.
Well, I think that one of the things that we can see that was glaring is the fact that there are so many things that are outsourced on the other side of U.S. soil. And so I thought, first off, how do we bring manufacturing back into the United States? We were certainly capable of producing, those kinds of goods before we outsourced them. So now is a good time to figure out how we bring that back. So one of the things here in our local community, we used to have a lot of manufacturing, and we have plants that are standing empty, and there are discussions on how to revitalize some of those things. The hindrance is that the renewable portfolio standard has created an expensive energy cost here in the state of Delaware. And so there's discussion on, first and foremost, there was supposed to be a 3% cap, which is actually at 19%. And so we're paying an enormous amount of extra in our utility bills as a result. And then there's discussion about making it go from 25% renewable to 40%. I understand that the green energy thing is an important thing, but we have to strike a balance. And if we can figure out what that balance is to be able to get a more affordable energy rate, we can actually attract manufacturing to come to the state of Delaware. And get this.
And that would create jobs.
Yes,
Yes.
manufacturing jobs have a multiplier effect of 1 to 5. So for every one manufacturing job, there's 5 more jobs that are created as a result of that one. So, it's a win-win if we can make it work. But there again, you need to have people that have a business acumen to be able to explore the economic development plan that needs to happen to make that a thing that will work here.
Okay.
So, that's going to be one of the things that I would like to focus on, is making sure that we're having those conversations, those very needed, robust conversations about what we do to address getting job growth back here, bringing quality jobs. People want to have livable wages, certainly. There's no reason that our youth are having to have this prolonged, what do they call it, extended adolescence, where they're staying at home until they're 25, 26 years old because they can't afford to live on their own. So we have to have some very real conversations about how we have that corrective measure. And I think that we just have not invited the right voices to the table. And there's a lot of backdoor, smoky room conversations.
Yes, I learned that.
And all of that. I really would like to see there be more transparency and accountability in government spending. We talked about, effective government and the tax dollars and all of that.
Yes.
That kind of all circles back. I don't think that we have a revenue problem here in the state of Delaware. There's talk about, increasing the tax burden on our citizens. How do you do that? How do you have, the ability, the heartlessness to impose even a higher tax burden on people that are already struggling trying to recover from COVID? It's nonsense. I don't think we've ever really had a revenue problem here in Delaware. Delaware is among the highest in the country for individual taxes for the state. And so with that piece of it alone, I think that we need to have the corrective measure be, how are we really spending our money? Show me the money.
Show me the money.
Show me the money.
Mama Rachelle want to see the money.
Transparency in government. And I think that we should have that right to see how our tax dollars are really being spent. So, that to me is a critical piece of how we start to really address the underlying socioeconomics, turn the corner, and get this thing going the way that it should be going.
Now, I have to, ask you, or, one of my biggest things I've learned coming through Legislative Hall and learning as an advocate, so many things, that relationships matter. And I've heard people talk very well about Lt.Governor Bethany Hall Long, but the governor, John Carney, that's the person to have the relationship with. To get anything done, you got to have a relationship with Governor John Carney. Do you think that you're in a position to do that, or do you have a relationship with him?
Well, if you peruse my social media, you'll see that we've had several moments where we've crossed paths on different bills that have come through the legislature. As a veteran, I participated with the legislation that had to do with getting marijuana approved for veterans that had post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And so, that was a compassionate measure. And so I was with the group of veterans when that happened. We had our warm fuzzy.
Yeah.
We had our photo op. I'm smiling, he's smiling. I've had a lot of different dealings with the veterans issues. So when the women's monument in Dover was erected, I was actually the designer of the commemorative pen and the license plate for that. So we shared another moment. And I remember I was running for state senate then, and we had the license plate, and we held it up, and he smiles and he whispers, he says, "Don't politicize this." So we have had interaction with one another. Yes. We've had conversations about business. I think one of the very first times that I actually had some interaction with him, he was traveling the state and having conversations with the community when he was seeking to become governor. And he had a discussion about diversity and inclusion with contractors. Okay. And so there were a lot of contractors still to this day that feel slighted in the processing of awarding of contractors to minority-owned businesses.
Yes, that is a problem.
It is. It very much so is. And so I was pretty new to the conversation at that point. So I'm that person that sits in the room and kind of listens until I feel that it's a good opportunity for me to contribute something to the conversation. And so he made his way around the table and he got to me, and he asked me my thoughts, and I told him, I said, well, I'm told that for ethnic and gender and disabled veteran-owned businesses that there are some set-asides that I should be able to participate in having preference in the awarding process. And I said, well, I've done all the things that I needed to do, and I'm still finding that I'm meeting with no success. It's 4 years later, and I'm still waiting on an answer of why I'm meeting with no success. So, those are the conversations that we talked about earlier about, I hear you, but I don't hear you. And I don't circle back to bring you an answer that, I say, I really don't have a good answer to that question, and I'll tell people quick, if you don't hear from me in a couple of days, circle back with me and call me to see where we are with that. Okay.
Yeah, because it takes a few days, sometimes even a week or so, depending on the severity of the situation. It might take 2 weeks to get an answer, but at least let me know that you're available we can email each other. I've had the good fortune of also chatting with Governor Carney when I was a teacher, and he came to the school, and very personable man, very, very personable. And I can say, maybe this is why I like him, but he remembers me. Whenever we see each other out and about at various different events, he takes a moment to say, hey, Rachelle, and I appreciate that. Does that mean that I agree with every piece of policy that he signs? Not really. I would like to see more from Governor John Carney, and I'd love to do an interview with him. But yes, very personable. But how much does he really remember of what the people are asking of him? I don't know.
I think, in all fairness, I would like to be liked less and be known for being impactful and doing things. It's just my personal preference. It'd be great if we could achieve both. But I know that when I sink my teeth into something, I'm diligent about getting that thing done. I mean, I went to school and got my master's degree and finished up my undergraduate with 8 kids, and I was just bent to get that done in 2 years on the dean's list. So I know when I really get engaged in something, I seek to achieve that thing. And we have too many things that are pressing here. It's nice to be liked, but I would rather be respected for my takeaways
being effective
and the results. And that's the problem that I have right now with a lot of our elected officials, is that I'm a results-driven person, and I need to see you do what's in the best interest of the people. And I just feel that we just have not done that. And I'm not interested in having a popularity contest. If people who know me know that if I lose my smile, it's serious.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind as well.
It's serious. So, there are things that we have to really attack aggressively here to get some results, because people are hurting. People are hurting, and we don't have any time to play around anymore, because people are dying in our streets. And as long as, and I'm sorry, as long as it's affecting isolated communities, I don't really see a priority in dealing with that. The opioid epidemic wasn't an epidemic until it started attacking the affluent portions of our culture.
Yes, it was okay as long as our people were dropping dead in the streets of opioid addiction. But once it hit out in certain other neighborhoods, now it's a problem.
But it's always been a problem. And the things that we have underlying here in the city of Wilmington have continuously been a problem, and I don't see an urgency, and that bothers me, is that there is not an urgency to deal with the human suffering across this entire state.
And unfortunately, it seems, and I could be wrong about this, is that none of the urban or brown community concerns really matter to the people in politics until it does affect the affluent. It had to take certain people getting sick and dying and being a part of, all of these things have to happen in order for it to matter. Black Lives Matters, because George Floyd was killed. Well, what about all of those, Tamir Rice and Mike, all of these people before George Floyd? But when we started destroying property, if you want to call it destroying property, which they all had insurance for it, so that's fine. But it took the aggressive behavior of people in the urban community to tear some stuff up for government to look and say, oh boy, we've got a problem. We've got to get the knee out of the neck.
Well, I mean, to be honest, we haven't been able to breathe for generations. Okay?
Yes.
So that saying, I can't breathe, means something different to me than just that moment. It's way bigger than that. And to be perfectly candid with you, I'm quite insulted with the empty gestures that came out of that conversation. Taking down a daggone statue, changing the branding on some syrup or some rice, did not move the needle for the concerns that are social justice reform. If you want to do something, address it. And I don't mean in a vile way. You have got to get to the point, and I've had this conversation because there are some people that honestly believe that racism it doesn't exist.
I've met those people. I've met some people.
Well,
during the riots, I had a little Italian lady, bless her heart. She had to be every bit of 65, 70 years old, standing there over at a place here in Wilmington called Trolley Square. And, people were marching, and she just came down and asked, why are the black people so angry? Like, she couldn't understand why we were protesting, and it just broke my heart because I realized that if she didn't get it, most of the people on her level probably didn't get it either. In her age grade and bracket and lifestyle, they did not understand why are all these black people marching up and down the street, and why are the police here to protect us from the windows getting broken? Like, just totally right over her head.
It is, and it's sad that things have to erupt in such a violent manner before these things can be addressed, because it's like the squeaky wheel. It doesn't get oiled until it just gets annoying. To the point that you actually do something about it. But I think that people are tired. And my mom and people of that generation, I've heard them say, I didn't think I'd ever see this again in my lifetime. And it's sad that we are revisiting this moment in history. But when you seek to erase history, removing the statue removes the need to have the conversation about the statue. And so when you have those conversations about what that whole era was about, it keeps it fresh, because if you erase it, you're doomed to repeat history.
Well, I kind of like having the statues down. I don't want to honor people that were slave owners.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, we still need to have those discussions about it, but that's a gesture that didn't have impactful change for us. That's the only extension that I'm trying to take that down. Okay. Is that I don't want people to mistake that is the end all be all, because it's not. It's a part of the beginning of a discussion. And yes, we have museums for artifacts that we can go visit and have those conversations, but we can't completely take that out of the conversation, because that remains a part of our history. And if we don't revisit those moments and teach people about that, how do they know where their history is? How do they know what we overcame, what the struggle was about? Because now we're repeating some of the struggle because there isn't a prevalence. I don't know about you, but I graduated in 1987, and we didn't have a lot of Black history when I was coming through high school. I didn't learn about Frederick Douglass, and I didn't learn about the great
Assata Shakur.
Exactly.
Yes.
I didn't learn about those things until I was much older in my adult years.
Yes.
And it's sad that we just don't have the cultural well-roundedness that we really ought to have as people. And I think that speaks to why we can't embrace our cultural differences, because we don't celebrate culture.
Yeah.
It's like dirty little pieces here and there, instead of having a spirit where we embrace those kinds of things. I can share with you that when I was in the military in the 90s, I was one of 3 women in a squadron of 400. I was also one of 3 blacks in a squadron of 400. So I was catching it, on both sides. And I remember that while I was going through that experience, they decided that they would have it wasn't diversity or inclusion. It was sensitivity training. So
Yes.
we've come a long way in our
Yes.
conversations
Yes.
as to what we create the narrative to look like. But we still are having those necessary conversations about how we are more inclusive and how we embrace culture and differences. We could celebrate those things. They don't have to be things that are painful. Especially at this day and age. We got to do
Well,
better.
I certainly love to see more and more of our people as public servants. I've had the good fortune of meeting some amazing, strong, and powerful brown women. Sherry Dorsey Walker being one of them, Melissa Minor Brown, Michelle Harley, Hanifa Shabazz, and the list just goes on. Just amazing and powerful women, and I support. I support strong women of every nationality, but I have to start in my own backyard. And you have impressed me tonight that you are definitely a woman of strength. Anybody who can give birth to 10 babies.
One at a time.
And do
Yes.
all that you've done and still serve in the United States military to serve our country, our nation. I just applaud you as a woman beyond the candidacy, but definitely as a woman. But in our closing, I want you to tell pretend that you're speaking to those people who are Democrats and maybe tell them why they should vote for you. Just talk to the Democrats and tell them why they should vote for you instead of Lt.Governor Bethany Hall Long.
Well, I'd just like to charge and challenge each and every one of you to do your homework on all candidates, not just me, but all candidates. You have to vote your values and not your party affiliation. So if there are things that are in my platform, things that you've heard me talk about this evening that speak to you in a way that you can relate to, if there's something that you feel resonates as a deep sincerity in me or a sense of loyalty or honor in the service of the office, then those are the things that I would encourage you to go into the voting booth with, not just for me, but other candidates as well. The best voter is an educated voter. And so when you go inside that voting booth, you need to know what all of those names on that ballot signify to you. So if you feel that I would best represent the needs of the state of Delaware, then I encourage you, whether you are mailing in your ballot, whether you are determined to get there in person and push the button, your vote matters, your voice matters. And if you really want to see impactful change in the state of Delaware, this is a tipping point year. There are some very hot topic issues. And if you're even that single issue voter, make sure that you have the candidate that you know is going to be diligently working to serve your interest. So again, if I am that candidate for you, I humbly ask you for your support. You can find my name, Donyale Hall. Now, you've heard that my opponent and I share that little piece of Hall.
Yes.
But I'm Donyale.
Yes.
And I would humbly ask you for your vote of support, and I will serve you with the same dignity and honor that I did our country. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close simply by saying one thing. When you go to the lever or to the booth to pull the lever, push the button, I don't know what you're going to do, mail it in, however you do the research and find out for yourself. Look at the record. What has Bethany Hall Long done for the state of Delaware as a Democrat? And look at the record of Donyale Hall. What does her record say? And what do you think her promise to perform will be? Always, always, when you make your vote, do the research and make sure that the candidate that you're voting for really does have your best interests in their hearts. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you.
And I think you're warm, you're impressionable. I certainly pray you the very best of success. And should you end up in that seat, I'm coming by for a hot cup of tea so we can sit and do some chit-chatting.
Mine's not so hot anymore, but it's here.
Yes, I believe one of the biggest things is that you will be accessible. If folks out there have a question or they want to talk to you in the last hour, do you want to give them your cell phone number, or is there email that you would prefer?
Sure. Well, my name is online and all of my contact information is there. My phone number is 302-399-8838. And as you heard, I answer from the crack of dawn until much later than my husband likes. But I'll make sure and carve his time out.
Yes,
ma'am.
Yes. Give your hubby his time.
He will.
And y'all respect the hubby's time. But if you want to reach out, if you have some questions, maybe I didn't think to ask the question and you would like to ask, I want you to give Donyale Hall an opportunity, just a chance. Listen to what she has to say before you mail in those voting ballots, okay? Because your vote is your voice. And this is one of the most important elections that I can remember being a part of. Oh, and I want to close with this real quick before our folks leave us. We only have a moment. There are rumors that there's going to be civil unrest. No matter whether Biden wins or Trump wins, either side, there's going to be civil unrest. Do you think that's fake news, or do you think there's any credence to that?
You know, I take people at their word. And so if you promise me mayhem, I'm going to brace for it. So
okay.
If that's the rumor mill, the only thing that we can do is hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yes. And so I recommend to each and every person out there listening, continue to do the research and keep your eye on the election results, because both sides of the party, the blue and the red, people and their supporters have decided that there will be unrest no matter who wins. So if the red wins, the blue is upset. If the blue wins, the red's going to be upset. I don't know. I'm going and lock my door. I'm not coming outside. And anybody that comes inside, I'll have something very nice waiting for them.
Hello.
Hello. You have been listening to Rachelle Wilson here for Make Some Intelligent Noise, the Political Power Hour, with candidate for the Lieutenant Governor for the state of Delaware, Miss Donyale Hall. Say that number again.
302-399-8838.
8838.
That's it.
You can give her a call if you feel that you have a question, if you want to get to know her a little bit better. Please reach out. We've only got 5 days left, and it'll be time for your voice to be heard. Thank you for tuning in. And until we come together again, remember, evil can only triumph when good men do nothing. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Rachelle Wilson. Good night. Peace and grace.
That was amazing.